Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, and I'm beyond excited to speak with our latest special guest. He's an American comedian who's been in all our favourite comedy shows and has been involved with Conan O'Brien Show, Arrested Development, Parks and Recreation, VEEP, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and most recently The X-Files. It's Brian Huskey. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
Thanks
for having me on this podcast experience.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it's probably not every day that people from Scotland Skype into you, so I'm sure it's a special event for you too.
Yeah, it's more of a bi-weekly thing, so it's kind of cool when it happens more frequently.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to have you on. When I watched you on the most recent episode of The X-Files, I was like, oh my god, I've got to reach out to Brian. And then one of my friends, Tony, who does the X-Files podcast, beat me to the punch, and I was like, I'm still going to fire away and reach out to you. And that's kind of brought us here today.
Yeah, that's funny. You guys know each other.
Yeah.
Are you friendly rivals?
No, we're friends that we both just sort of work in sort of the same sort of hemisphere, and we're friends. Yeah. So it was just a wonderful coincidence. So it's I was quite excited. So I was going to listen to his episode with you, but I thought no, I don't want to risk potentially asking the same questions or going down the same route. So hopefully it's a bit different for you.
Yeah, we'll see. I have my pat answers that I will give.
Of course.
And then you can compare and just like, God, this guy's a real hack. He says the same shit.
Well, it'll make for an interesting double feature for someone. But one thing I always like, whenever I get anyone that's like involved in kind of film or comedy and everything, I always love to know what kind of kickstarted them into that kind of career, and what was the music or the comedy or the TV shows that inspired them as a young person, and what was it that kind of started your love affair with comedy?
The bit we just did about like comparing the interview story, like I feel like I tell this story all the time, but I've always been interested in comedy, and I have a framed speech I made in second grade about how I wanted to be a comedian when I grew up. But for me, my main influences was just sort of watching with my sister shows like, do you know who Carol Burnett is?
Yeah.
American. Yeah. So she used to have like a variety comedy show that we would watch reruns of. And then I was also a big fan of this American actor named Don Knotts, who just was like this skinny little bug-eyed kind of everyman underdog. Him and Tim Conway, who was also on Carol Burnett's show. They were like early influences for me, because I just remember as a little kid being so impressed and inspired by the fact like an adult could be acting like so ridiculous and be getting such a reaction from people. I was just like, that's the best. Are you kidding me? Because that's what we do all the time, but you can continue to do that as an adult. So I was like, that seems like something I'd like to do. So I think early on I was just like fascinated by the cause and effect of comedy. Like if you do this will get this reaction. Why? There seemed to be sort of like an alchemy to it, or some kind of witchcraft to it, that when you figure it out, you're like, oh, this is easy. This is easier than it might seem from the outside. I think that's it. And then along, as in high school, my biggest influences, like the things that kind of cracked my head open and just made me realize like there's so many variations and directions to go. And I guess like the understanding is like that comedy is an art form. Like it just as much as painting has so many different modes of approach and expression, comedy has that too. So when I discovered Monty Python, that blew my mind open. And Woody Allen, unfortunately he's one of these like creative people who's also a monster, but early on the stuff he did, I was like, this is astounding to me. And then after that, getting into college, I discovered Mr. Show, which is David Cross and Bob Odenkirk's comedy show, and then The Kids in the Hall, the Canadian guys. And I think early on, there's, like, probably like in middle school, like being able to sort of occasionally see Saturday Night Live, staying up late at somebody's sleepover and being able to see a Saturday Night Live thing was always like, oh my God, this is dangerous. So nothing sort of out of the ordinary, but just those were sort of my milestones.
You kind of mentioned, say, Monty Python there. Was there something that was appealing about that sort of very British sense of humor? Was that quite different to what you were watching in America?
Well, the thing I really liked about it was, and I think it was kind of in keeping with my like discovery and taste with like music and art stuff, was it I liked the absurdity teetered on like surrealism for me, because they would just take, I liked that they would take the audience, be like, here's the established world we're going to take you into, and then we're just going to keep kind of flipping it over and over again. And I love that it was almost like this kind of like Russian doll of worlds that they gave themselves permission to go into. The fact, like, when I first saw this thing where one sketch would lead to another sketch would lead to a cartoon, that was so crazy to me, because like from an American perspective, it was like start of sketch, end of sketch, claps, start of sketch, end of sketch, claps, and I think that was also just in our kind of regular sitcoms. It was every episode had a sort of resolution to it, and I like the open-ended approach to the ideas in that way. That I could just be like, yeah, it's going to be this, and there's no explanation as to why we chose to go this way, but we're making you really react and feel something, which I thought was kind of amazing. I mean, I'm sure everyone has this perspective, but it's just like for British culture, or for more sort of staid, traditional approach to performance and comedy, it really was pretty revolutionary. They were just they were really messing with the format in the most liberal way, which is great.
And do you think that's something that's kind of been lost in comedy nowadays?
I don't think so. I admit that there is a vast sea of comedy and performance and filmmaking that's being done, YouTube, and I'm sure other sort of like internet platforms that I just don't know about. You know what I mean? I think now, when I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she'll sort of stumble on some things, and a lot of it is pretty surreal. It's just sort of like weird and goofy for goofy's sake. But sometimes I think the comedy, like it to me, it sort of feels like, am I watching like a Japanese game show, or is this comedy? Because it just seems like such a bizarre juxtaposition of cutesy and kind of dark and aggressive and random and very quick. That's the other thing, is like the attention span for a sketch is pretty short at this point, it seems.
Cool.
But it's also, I was going to say, sorry,
okay.
It's also interesting at the same time that we're kind of in this period of like television. They say it's like the golden era of TV, but we're making TV that is verging on filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, as much as there's this kind of this battle for attention span, we're investing in much more. We're investing in long narrative kind of like journeys for the audience, which is cool.
Yeah, that kind of change from episodic to kind of serialized television, sort of from that kind of post-2000 era.
Yeah. Which I'm sure it's sort of the byproduct. It's almost like Breaking Bad, I think, was good for that. And people are like, oh, wait, if it works out, we can hook the audience for a long time. Okay, let's go back to that. And I think it's creatively, that's what people have wanted for a long time. So they're not just this kind of like procedural thing where it's like, here's the case and it's done. Here's the case and it's done. You know.
I'm curious as well. What for you were like? Obviously, you had this strong passion for comedy. What was it like trying to break into comedy, sort of in the '90s and early 2000s, when sort of the explosion of the internet, and it seemed like everyone that was a comedian had their own NBC sort of show and HBO stand-up. What were the challenges you faced?
I started real late. Like I've always wanted to do it, but I kept putting it off or being scared of it. And I was a photographer, or I was in a band, and then I was a photographer, and that was both of those things at the same time for a while. So I was kind of circling the creative, performative world, but not admitting that I really wanted to just act. So my perspective on a lot of that was I didn't feel as invested. I didn't see myself as a comedian or even an actor for a long time. I was kind of like comedy adjacent, or it was more of like a hobby that I was doing to kind of prove to myself that I could do it. So I guess the difference is I wasn't as aware of it as I feel like a lot of other people who decided that that's what they wanted to do, that was their job. I was still in this kind of position of like, yeah, that would be cool if this works out, but you know, if it doesn't, I'm going to pretend like it doesn't matter. So I guess I'm not answering your question. I didn't really have this feeling of like, what's happening in comedy? The landscape is changing, because I was figuring out the landscape for the first time. But I was aware, like I did this. You can find it on YouTube. It's a stupid video from this one-man show I did, and the video is called "Monster in a Wheelchair," and I put it up, and it like over Christmas at one point it had this huge spike, and it went viral, and it went from like, you know, it exceeded 1 million hits, which at that time was like, oh my god, nobody can do this, and that was a thing for me. I was like, oh, this is another option, I guess. This is something else that people will probably be doing, but I didn't pursue it because I'm lazy.
And then you kind of became involved in sort of late night with Conan O'Brien. Was that maybe sort of the moment you started to feel like, wow, I've made it? Like it was one of the highest viewed shows, and there you are.
Well, yeah, kind of. Like, for our crew of, but I'm involved still to this day with a theater called the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and they would kind of draw from our, you know, we do improv shows and sketch shows, and they would kind of draw from our talent pool there. So for us, it was almost like, you know, if that was our comedy college, that was one of the kind of proving grounds where you're like, all right, yeah, you should keep doing this. This is you've passed your thesis, and now you're kind of maybe entering into the workforce and stuff. So yeah, it was one of those milestones. It was one of those kind of like mile markers where you're like, okay, cool, keep it going. You're doing good. We're all proud of you.
One of my favorite sketches you did on the Conan O'Brien Show was like, I'm a Star Trek fan, and I must admit you're a great Mr. Spock, and it's you and Triumph the dog just trolling these Star Wars fans. There you are, just flipping them off. And I was curious, what was was it quite a surreal situation to find yourself in? Like, there you are, Mr. Spock, there's a talking dog, and there's these Star Wars fans. What was that experience like?
It was really fun. It was very frantic. It was a very, like, you show up and, like, they dressed me up over at Conan, and then they shuttled us over there, and they're like, okay, go. Just walk amongst the crowd. We're going to get some footage real fast. So it kind of went by in a blur, but the funny thing was afterwards we shot until probably about 7, a little later than that. And when we got back to the studio, the makeup department had left, so I was stuck with Spock ears on my head, and no way to get it off. And they're like, "Well, if you want to come back tomorrow, we'll take them off." And I was like, "I mean, it's New York. Nobody's going to bat an eye that I have Spock ears riding on the subway, but I really don't want to do that." But so luckily, they took us up to the Saturday Night Live like offices, and they were able to take them off.
And
but it was really fun. I mean, it was also really kind of amazing and a testament to just fandom, like how intensely vicious some of the people were in reaction to me, you know, of being Spock at the Star Wars thing, or being Spock and flipping them off. And I mean, I guess anybody that gets flipped off should have a reaction.
it probably seems like nowadays that kind of reaction seemed a bit tamer than it probably would nowadays.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it could have been a hilarious video of me getting my ass kicked on TV.
Probably getting more likely to be hit with a lightsaber toy than with a physical punch.
Exactly.
And then kind of like the following years, you started appearing in quite a lot of TV shows and films, things like sort of Step Brothers, Semi-Pro, Superbad. Did you sort of think that when you were making these movies that they would become like the cult hits that they are? Like you still hear people these days quoting sort of Superbad and Step Brothers as if it just came out the other day.
Yeah, I guess so. It's interesting because the people who make those comedies are the improv community that was spawned from Chicago, out of like Second City and Improv Olympic, led to the birth of the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. Like they were performing with those theaters, and they wanted to start their own troupe and theater. So there's kind of like a family tree that runs through a lot of like present day comedy, and so in doing those shows, you end up like it was like a huge deal, but it was very familiar territory because there's like a shared language. Mm-hmm. Like even like Will Ferrell comes from the Groundlings, and so even though you're working with like, you know, this comedy genius icon and Adam McKay, the director, it still had this feeling of like, oh, this is cool. We're just doing like some funny bits on this day. It doesn't have this vibe that like, oh, this is going to be something important. And I really don't think you should approach anything you're doing beyond just the experience of doing it. Because if you sort of have this end goal, like I've heard someone say, like, I think I'm writing a comedy classic. Like, no, that probably means you're not writing a comedy classic. You just never know. I mean, you absolutely have no idea what is going to sort of like resonate. But it does feel great to be part of that stuff. Like I'm immensely proud of that I've lucked into a lot of situations that are like, yeah, that's a bit of a quoted scene or a quoted situation or movie or whatever. Feels good. Yeah.
What kind of like because obviously you've got such an incredible resume. What kind of things do you find people randomly, like if it's in the street or reach out to you, think, oh yeah, I loved you in this, and it's like, oh yeah, like that sort of thing you maybe didn't expect to resonate. What kind of things tend to pop up, the surprises?
There's a show. Have you ever heard of a show called Workaholics?
No, I'm not familiar. I don't think it came to the UK.
Yeah, it's a Comedy Central show here in the States, and it kind of points out like how limited my sort of like understanding of like what will hit is, because I did the pilot and my manager at the time was like, what do you think of this show? I was like, I mean, the guys are great. It's really funny, but I don't think it's going to take off. And it became this huge hit in the States. But I played a character in that. He was like a drug tester at a working place, and his name is Robbie, and people will constantly quote lines I've said from that show as that character. And I'm always amazed they can recognize me, because my beard's very gray now, and it was not that way then. I guess the bald head gives it away in the glasses. That one, and then This Is the End, where I poke my head through the door, and I promise to give them all great blowjobs if they rescue me.
I remember that one, yes.
Proud moments like that. things that you want on your epitaph.
Absolutely.
You want on your headstone. Yeah, it's pretty random. And then a lot of times people are like, they feel like they know me, but they don't. I mean, they recognize me, but they don't know me from what. Sometimes I've had a couple of exchanges where people have said like, oh, I've been on this show. Like, no, you haven't. I'm like, oh, you're right. I guess I don't know what my resume is. Thank you, sir.
You've been mansplained your own resume.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
one thing I was kind of curious about, sort of like, obviously you've been in a lot of comedy, but then you were in sort of the newsroom. I'm curious, like, as an actor, what it's like working with like an Aaron Sorkin script when something like that lands. What's it like to work with his words in a way?
Well, I would love to say that I got to work with his words, but my role on the show was the technical director. So pretty much, and it's one reason I decided not to do the show, because I felt like I would have been relegated with some golden handcuffs. I think the brunt of my dialogue would have been moving forward, like cut to 2 and camera 5 and fade out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but apart from that, it was fascinating to be inside of that. Mm-hmm. You know, it was that kind of thing of like, you realize like, oh, I'm getting to work with kind of an institution, you know, like the idea of like a Sorkin script or a Sorkin project has its own pre-existing history and just a knowledge of what it, you know, it's like doing a Mammoth play or something. Yeah. You're like, oh, this has some real, you know, weight to it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, again, it was intimidating, but also terribly exciting, you know, which is good. I like when I end up in job situations where I feel a little scared, but not that it's beyond my reach. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of like having a little bit, a high wire that's maybe about 5 feet off the ground feels pretty good. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to have canyon-sized one.
And then obviously you ended up in it's just a kind of multiple question. This one, like, obviously you worked on the Inbetweeners, which was like an American remake of like an insanely popular British TV show that kind of spawned some movies and things. Like, were you aware of it as its popularity in the UK, and did you sort of dive into the original for research, or was it like, no, I want to go into this kind of blind?
I was aware, like I heard that they were doing a remake of it, that it existed over there, and that was a huge, hit. But I think if my character had been like probably one of the kids, you know, or one of the or like a really established character, I might have done more research. But I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think my guy was maybe just in the American version. Mm-hmm. Clearly, I did no research to answer your question. Yeah, no research, just dove in.
Yeah, you definitely, Mr. Sutherland was definitely in the UK one. He was considered a bit of a, I always remembered him as the character where everyone thought he was gay, and everyone was like, no, my dad's not gay, and no, it would be always sort of that double entendre. It was very much that very kind of British kind of character in a way.
Yeah, I think I have a tendency to do that, where I don't do too much research if it's a pre-existing role, just because I don't want to unconsciously do an imitation. You know what I mean? I don't want to give myself, even if I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to be unaware that I'm lifting something, you know, from the pre-existing thing. I had that with VEEP, like I reappear on that, but I auditioned myself and a lot of people who have subsequently recurred on the show all sort of like tested for main roles on the show. Uh-huh. And so I watched a lot of that because I feel like that was a tone and a pace and almost like an attitude to the world that you really had to kind of, you had to sort of research it. I had to research it. Because the other thing is, like, you had to kind of let go of trying to be funny. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's a lot of it. It's just like, this is just funny behavior. So if you just execute it and let the other person react, it's going to be funny. But actually, the thick of it is so great.
Yeah, that was one of the kind of questions I was going to ask you, because like I'm a huge fan of VEEP and the thick of it, In the Loop. You know, it's an Oscar-nominated script and everything. And what I was kind of curious, obviously with your work in Inbetweeners and then sort of VEEP, there's sort of either a direct remake or a semi-remake of a UK kind of original property. And we've sort of seen over the past kind of decades, really, that some UK shows like The Office, they just translate so well, they find an audience. VEEP, it keeps the spirit of the original UK show, but then the American one is its own beast in a way. What do you think sometimes, why do you think some shows struggle to translate and others perhaps just explode like Office and VEEP?
I think what's interesting, like The Office. Well, I guess to answer your question, I think the involvement of the original creator is really important. Like Armondo Iannucci did the first 3 seasons of VEEP, so he was, and he didn't hold on to it with such tight reins, with the attitude of like, okay, this is how we did it in the original version, so it has to kind of replicate that. He's intelligent enough to know that it's, that you're transposing it in a way, and it's going to change. So I think in that case, it was just the thing that the original creator still had his guiding hand involved with it. And then I think with The Office, I think Ricky Gervais was involved the first year. Yeah, and then he kind of stepped away. So, but there have been other instances. I think there's a show called Coupling, and the IT Crowd. They tried to do the IT Crowd.
Peep Show was another one that seemed to get to like the pilot stage and fall apart.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's on YouTube, and dare I say, it's quite a painful watch.
Yeah, and I think that, like for Peep Show, that to me has an inherent British sensibility that doesn't. It's almost like, I feel like moving over to an American execution, I feel like an American using Peep Show format would get really, I don't know, aggressive or bitty. Like it. The thing I love about Peep Show is like, it's this camera style that at first is very, not to make a bad pun, but in your face, and after a while you forget that this POV kind of style is there. I feel like in an American execution, they would like lean into it all the time and use that as like another comedy sort of like joke machine, when it really should just sort of fade that it's happening. Because that's the other thing, like when the Office, that whole doc style. Yeah. At first, people are like, "This is crazy." I feel sick watching it. It's so swimmy, and now it's just like the most standard way of shooting. That people choose. It doesn't communicate that you're a fly in the wall anymore. It's just another camera approach.
What was it like working with my fellow Scot, Armondo Iannucci? Did he teach you much about kind of Scottish humour? What was he like as a creative talent?
He's great, man. He's like he's my favorite directors and people I've worked with, or maybe showrunners, are the people who have the confidence to let the people he's hired do what they feel like they should do for the scene. He creates a space, and he said as such, he's like, there's a reason that you people have been asked to come and be part of this. It's like, there's something I see in your approach with our material that I think you understand it. And so but I don't know where you're going to take it. So I'm going to turn it over to you and trust that maybe you'll make discoveries that I never could. And one of my strongest beliefs about comedy is like, comedy does not stop at the page, or it doesn't stop when you're putting it on its feet and shooting it. Like, it goes way beyond that. Like, I really think like the editor is one of the most important performers and developers of any comedy project. So anytime I work on something, they're like, nope, here's the way to do it. There's got to be a way. It's not working, but it's my idea, so we just have to keep hammering at it. There has to be a lot of latitude and flexibility and kind of like figuring out what's funny. And that's why stand-ups will have a joke, and if it doesn't work the first time, they'll keep trying and maybe finding the nuance that makes it work. And they do that in a great way on VEEP. which they could not do as a network show. They can only do on HBO because they'll be. I've worked on there a couple times where we've gone in, started the scene, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus has been like, "Nope, this is not working. We have to rework this scene," and they'll just stop, and the writers will come in, and they'll take 2 hours to kind of rewrite a scene or re-improvise it, and then go back and try it again. And that's like a luxury you just don't have on, ABC, NBC, that kind of thing.
With like VEEP, they always seem to have a bit of a trend of sort of British actors becoming directors on the show. I always think of Chris Morris, who's created some brilliant work as as an actor and then a creative talent, things like Four Lions. What's it like working with a director that you know is sort of an actor? Is there a sort of different relationship you get with a director like that?
Well, I'll say like Chris Morris, The Brass Eye,
and
Jam are two. Those are two other like head cracking open comedy discoveries. So when he directed an episode I did, that was a thing of like, oh my god, I'm pretty terrified, in an excited way. But the difference I noticed like with him and Addison is that they'll kind of participate more in the I guess the rehearsal or the sort of, I'm not really sure, because Armondo does this too, but he does it from a more kind of like a step back and watch you guys. I mean, this is funny because Chris Morris literally would kind of we'd be running the scene and he'd come over and just kind of put his head right next to yours and look at the other guy and then come around. So if it had been Chris Morris, I would have been like, who's this weirdo? What's he doing? But there was something that I liked about it. That it's like, oh, he's getting in there with us and being us for the scene. And then as a result, he had these great suggestions just based on getting in our kind of like zone and seeing like, okay, you're looking at me this way, so maybe it would be funny if you said that. And if he had watched it from the outside, I don't think he would have had that perspective. So I don't know. I think everybody's different, but there is a danger when the director's an actor that you feel like you're getting a line reading, or you're nervous about he has a better way of doing this, and I'm not doing. A little comparison stuff. That's my own insecurities. But I'm an actor, so that's part of my job.
Absolutely. I think there's every actor out there probably has all their different insecurities, and that's what drives them to be kind of top of their field. And another Scot that you kind of worked with was Karen Gillan in Selfie, and it's such an interesting show to sort of look at because you have someone like Karen Gillan. She's going to be in probably the two biggest box office movies of this year. The New Avengers and Jumanji continues, and then you've got John Cho. Obviously that show only lasted a season, and then you've got these people that go on to be huge stars. Do you think like comedy is too easily cancelled these days, that shows perhaps in the 90s and 80s would be given that breathing room to continue? Now it's quite easy to just say, oh, we'll cancel it and something else will come in.
I think that's been like an existing pattern and problem with networks for a long time. Like, the famous story about Seinfeld was that they wanted to cancel it after like 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, this is garbage. This will never work. Nobody's ever going to get this. So I think it's, at the network level, that it's always just, you're sort of hoping that there are executives and people sort of making more administrative, creative decisions. You know what I mean? Like, they're the ones who really have to answer to the advertisers and stuff, who will see the long game of a show. But there's so much financial pressure in such a machine that's one of the things you kind of learn as an actor. I think in anybody in this field, where you're like, you can't really take it personally, because it might not be the executives that you've been dealing with directly, but it's the people at Coca-Cola, 5 steps away from the executives at Fox or whatever, who are making a decision that influences this chain reaction. But then kind of it ends up, you're like, you're out of job. And then it's like, oh, it was me. I'm the reason the show ended. You're like, no, it's some guy in an office who has a beef with another guy in an office. It has nothing to do with you. You're just sort of the byproduct of it. But I think I hope that the networks are taking notice of their main competitors like Netflix, Amazon, HBO. These pay service channels that give projects the time and breadth to kind of find themselves.
And with, like, you were kind of touching on, like, the freedom of something like HBO and the writers being involved. Obviously, you've got a small role in Curb Your Enthusiasm. What's it like going sort of toe-to-toe with Larry David in that style where you don't have a script, but you know you've got to get from A to B? What's it like being in that sort of company and creating something on the spot?
I live in that zone, like, as an improviser. I'm far more confident when you just sort of say, like, well, here's the idea, let's see what happens. It took me a long time to get comfortable with having a script and being accepting the responsibility of, like, okay, so you spent a lot of time writing this and now you want me to say it and you're going to document me saying it? Oh, that's a lot of pressure. What if I just, like, said what I thought the idea was? Is that better? So for me, it's fine, but for a lot of actors, it's the inverse. It's like, they're like, no way. I just give me what to say and I'll do it. So Curb, and I had auditioned for Curb for a long time, and they kind of wanted me on the series before it ended. So I had done a lot of auditions with him. And the bit I ended up doing is, like, I'm kind of like the middleman. Yeah, the
cut and chat guy.
Yeah, I was like, but she's getting to say all the fun stuff. But,
what is the audition process like?
It doesn't matter. It's just like, I'm still part of an amazing show. So it's fantastic.
What is, like, the audition process like for something like Curb Your Enthusiasm? Is it testing your improvisation skills, or what do they do?
Yeah, you go in. I mean, the cool thing is, like, you do it with Larry David. Or, if you were doing a scene with Garland, you would do it with him. But they give you these little strips of paper that just says, like, Larry is late to go pick up Cheryl Hines, but he wants to get an ice cream cone. You're taking a long time ordering. That's it. Uh-huh. And so you just go in and you just do it, And the interesting thing as an improviser, like, one of the things you learn is not to say no, not to fight on stage, not to kind of stall the action. But the whole thing with Curb is that it's all about conflict. It's all about sort of like a battle of wills, or a battle of one man's will against, the societal norms, or what is a societal sort of like irritant for him. So that part of it, the first couple of times, I was like, oh, right, we're supposed to fight. We're supposed to escalate it, because I found myself kind of like diffusing the situation. But after a couple of times, I was like, right, we want to end up screaming at each other. Okay.
And then with, obviously, you had a guest role in Arrested Development as well, just as it kind of came back on sort of the Netflix format. What was the feeling like on set when, like, this is the show come back really from the dead? Was there sort of an excitement on set? What was that kind of reaction like to be there when it came back?
I would love to give an answer. It was like, oh my God, it was amazing. But that scene was so big in scope that I just sort of felt like I was part of, like, a large, complex scene. I mean, I know Tony Hale, and I was trying to see if he was on set that day and stuff, just to kind of, because I was like, oh, it'd be nice to meet some of the other people and stuff. But for me, doing that scene and stuff was a thing of, like, well, this is really cool, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing Arrested Development. I'll give an honest answer. You know what? I won't lie. And I just did it. Mm-hmm. And to be frank, I was like the reboot. I was not as into.
Yeah, it was such a disappointment because like people watch Arrested Development, see them all together, and then you're watching it like, when are they all getting together? It's sort of like that Simpsons joke. When are they getting to the firework factory? It was just really, it was quite a frustrating watch. I found it to be, but you know, when it's the first few seasons were just incredible. So hopefully, when we get this, you know, much fabled return again, hopefully they've learned the lessons of sort of the reboot.
They haven't.
Oh dear.
I'll let you know. Yeah, they and it's just part and parcel of that. They're all very, you know, they've all kind of moved on, and their schedules are such that they can't coordinate. And I guess that they can't. I don't know if Netflix is it Netflix?
Yeah, it's Netflix, now. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I guess they just can't pony up the money that might require, you know, a full cast commitment kind of thing.
And one thing that it's become almost one of these things that you say people kind of recognize you from here, there, and everywhere. That you're probably best known as sort of if Google was a man. That you know, you're talking about one of your early YouTube hits getting 1 million. I mean, the first part of that series has got 38 million viewers. Did you expect it to blow up the way it did, or do you just sort of do these things sometimes? Think, well, I might get an audience, we'll see, and then you find out, wow, 38 million. It must really have connected.
I never go in expecting anything. I mean, part of it is my own ignorance. I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is funny. I'm not embarrassed to do this, and I like some of the people involved. And I had no idea. You know, you never know. Like that could easily have been, if the timing of that had been different, it could have just gotten 100,000. You know what I mean? I was very surprised by it, and it's pretty cool. But at the same time, it also feels very distant to me. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't affect my day to day, except for like the random kind of encounters with people. And I guess I don't know. I guess that is the healthiest version of doing this job for me. And I think for a lot of people, because it's like you just doing the job, the experience of it is the thing that I'm going to have for myself. And then the after effect is going to sort of be little moments that pop up. But if I sort of held on to like, 38 million, that quantifies my worth, that would lead to heroin addiction. So I don't want to do that.
And then one of like, obviously you've done work on say Bob's Burgers, and the co-founder of our network and this co-host Charlene, they're huge fans of Bob's Burgers and have done several kind of podcast episodes analysing it. So I reached out to them when I told them you were coming on, and they had like 3 questions for you, you know, as the big fans they are. And
cool.
Tristan himself ranks your character as his favourite. And so his 3 questions are, is the voice of Ruddy one you've always had in your quiver, or did you develop it specifically for Bob's Burgers?
I think I just developed it for Bob's, and by developed it, I mean I came up with it at the table read, because they just, it was the first time, it was the first job I did for them, mm-hmm. and they're like, so you go and you do a table read for the writers and network people, and some fans come, and a lot of times they can get you the script the night before, but I think that time they just had it in the morning, so mm-hmm. I was like, okay, a little asthmatic kid, so I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants, which, going back to my improv like training, I'm glad that I can trust that if I make a discovery, I can build upon it in the moment. And I think I made just one, you know, I said one line a certain way that got a reaction. I was like, oh, okay, I should follow this. And then I heightened certain aspects of it, you know, his wheeziness. And because I think the other thing is, like, in that context, if it was too much, they would just say, pull it back. But if you don't give them enough, mm-hmm. if you don't give them enough to see where it can go, they're like, nah, he doesn't get it. But I love doing that show so much. Everybody involved is so funny and kind and collaborative in that kind of Armondo Iannucci vein of just like Lauren Richard, the creator, really delights in letting the actors just kind of go off script and he'll improvise with you, and they use a ton of stuff like that.
That must be a challenge in itself. That sort of improvising with a cartoon, that it must present sort of challenges. So that's quite exciting that you get to improvise like that.
Well, the thing is, like, we will do the vocal tracks first. So they have the script, you do the script read, and then they'll do the record, and then they'll do the animation to what we've recorded, which is, and then later on, if they need to tweak anything, they'll do ADR or additional dialogue recording. But even then, they allow you to kind of improvise stuff. I don't know what the timeline for the animation is, but I think they do it in such a way that they give themselves some freedom for discovery, which goes back to the point I was making, is like, in a comedy you have to just keep finding stuff, throwing stuff away. You can't be married to the one idea, you know what I mean, too much.
And Tristan,
unless the premise of the show is built around it.
Of course.
And you're like, oh, we're screwed. Look at this.
And I think Tristan definitely showing his fan credentials with this one was like, his favourite moment in Bob's Burgers is in the kids rob a train where Ruddy is at the back of a wine train and trying to protect his best friend, who's a beanbag chair, and he screams and freaks out before the beanbag explodes. And Shar and Tristan had very much the same question. Do you have a favourite Ruddy moment, or one that you're particularly fond of?
The very first time he appeared, I really loved that whole episode, where he's so sheltered that he's excited to have to kind of break the rules with Louise, and I feel like it just had there's this one line that somebody has turned into like a pin and a T-shirt and stuff. It's like fun hurts my lungs. And I was contacted by the people that make the swag, and they're like, hey, do you want some free stuff? I was like, yeah, oh my god. I didn't write it, but I'll claim it. I'll claim that I wrote that. I really love that one. And then there's another one where I play Rudy's father as well. So there's one, I can't remember which episode it was, but there's one scene where I had to do both voices in the same scene like several times. And that was really fun to just do a scene with myself.
And what kind of challenges does that present? Do you sort of do the two parts, or do you do them separately? How did you kind of do that moment?
I just did them back and forth. I just talk like Rudy's dad, and I talk like Rudy, and it worked out. It was fun.
And then,
I'm sure there's a huge you could analyze it from a psychological perspective. Like, oh, you're really good at talking to your inner child. That's interesting.
And then, as you were saying, you've voiced a few characters on Bob's Burgers. Is there any type of character that you've been sort of itching to do, or any voice you've been waiting to debut, as it were?
Not really. I mean, I played a representative of a sort of like large corporate food services conglomerate, like a Monsanto system that like provides the food for the cafeteria, and I just really enjoyed that one because I got to improvise with John Benjamin. I do like playing, and I think it's just where my register of my voice is. I like playing sort of like failed authority figures, or authority figures with no sort of perspective on that they're not very authoritative. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm always itching to do more stuff on there. There's another character named Miss Merkin, who's the piano teacher or piano player and piano teacher. And that's fun to do, like an older lady. I don't know. I love that I'm sure it raises issues of casting, but I love that they let men do kind of like bad versions of female characters a lot of times. I think it's really funny. And
what's it like doing voice work compared to screen acting? Is it something that you enjoy maybe a little bit more, or what have you got a kind of preference?
It's so funny you say that, because I literally yesterday was sort of telling someone, I was like, I want to do more voiceover stuff. I mean, the preference is it's much easier. You don't have to put on makeup. You don't have to do costumes. You don't have to, there's not waiting around for hours, you know, to do your shot. There's more sort of like, oh, this is fun. It you know, inherently it's more, there's less sort of like, what's the word? There's less artifice around it. You know what I mean? It's just your voice and kind of like trying to illustrate this idea through your voice. I don't think I prefer one or the other. I bet the older I get, I'm like, yeah, let me just do voiceover, because I don't have anything to prove about being on screen.
You can turn up to work in your pajamas as well.
Yeah, and also you don't see yourself age as much.
And then,
you don't look at the screen, you're like, oh my god, I'm bald. When did that happen?
And then with like one of your, we kind of touched upon this at the beginning, the X-Files episode you were on recently. I mean, I'm a lifelong X-Files fan, and I would rank that up there with one of the all-time best. I kid you not. And obviously cool. It dropped a few weeks ago, and you know, I loved it. And to say the episode is a little crazy is probably an understatement. Yeah. What was your thoughts when that script arrived on your desk? As like a creative person yourself, how did you visualize this multifaceted political satire, multi-dimensional sci-fi craziness?
Well, the thing about it was the sides that I got, like the scenes that they gave me to prepare, were what were they? It was the first encounter with Mulder in the parking deck, where I show up and I'm like trying to convince him it's like of the conspiracy, and then the one with Scully, and it's all parking deck stuff, all of our encounters, and then the very last scene where we sort of say, you know, it's like maybe the thing was to find each other, and I didn't know that it was that Darren Moore. I'm an X-File appreciator, but not a fan. And I didn't know the tone and approach he did for his work. So I just did them all very seriously. I really treated like this was a man who was maybe sort of suffering because of this conspiracy. You know, the idea, it's almost like someone believes he's had an alien encounter and no one believes him. So I play it very seriously. So when I got the script, I was like, "What the crap is this?" It kind of blew my mind, and I remember, and I talked to him. I was like, "This is probably about 20 times more dialogue than I expected I was going to get to do, which I'm super excited about. And then 2, I don't know what's going on in a lot of this." He's like, "Good, you should, because I want to just like lead people down this rabbit hole that's going to be like as crazy as what's going on in your head." So that's a very long-winded way of answering a question, but it's basically, I was like, I didn't know what I was in for, and then when I saw it, I was like, this is amazing. And then I just trusted Darren. He's like, it's going to be really weird doing this, and I hope you're game for it, but I want you to do each take, I want you to maybe do a different version. I want you to do like a really dedicated, serious X-Files conspiracy version, and then a really goofy, over-the-top kind of winking X-Files version, and then just like a goofy comedy version. And he would just sort of select the take that he wanted for, you know, the certain portion of the show. Within the same scene, there will be a thing, because a friend of mine was like, it was weird when you were like giving this long conspiracy monologue, and then you break away and say to Mulder, like, cut that out, you know. I was like, yeah, he told me to do that.
How did they kind of come to you for this episode? Was this one you had to audition for, or was it like
I auditioned for it? Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, I had auditioned for it, and there's an actor named Kumail Nanjiani who's on the show called. Yeah, so I'm friends with him, and I had worked with him on this show called The Grinder. And so I guess he did his X-Files episode shortly after The Grinder, and Darren was like, do you know anybody who would be good for a part in the show that Kumail was doing? He's like, well, Brian Huskey's great, I like him. And Darren's like, oh yeah, I forgot about him, he's great. I guess he had liked my work for a little bit. and he said I wasn't right for that. But then when I came in again the next year, he was like, "Oh, great, you would be perfect for this part." And a lot of people are like, he's like, "Did he cast Huskey because he has a gray beard and he's balding? He just looks like a version of Darren." Which I was like, if that's the case, that's fine. I will be a part of Darren Morgan's psyche.
I'd love to know, like, one of my favorite moments in that episode is and I'd love to know what it was like to be on set the day, like, the kind of episode ends with this a kind of 60s style alien that comes off a spaceship, makes some funny noises, and then pretty much quotes Trump's speech where he announces he's running for election, saying humans are sending rapists to the universe, you can play with Uranus instead. What was that like being on set, like that day where you're watching that full thinking, this is different?
It was totally different. I mean, when I read the script, I was like, wow, this is Trump's speech. Oh, they're really going after Trump. I love this. It was cool. You know, it was like an overnight shoot because we had to shoot nighttime. But the thing where he comes off the spaceship and then gets on the little hovercraft, hoverboard, they didn't know. Fox and Scully, I can't remember their names now. Gillian Anderson and
Fox and Scully, you were spot on.
They didn't know that he was going to do that. So the very first take, he came riding over and they did the scene, but then like exploded with laughter.
I know, I'm almost struggling not to laugh just thinking about it in my head here.
Yeah. Because Darren didn't even have that idea. He saw that the actor who played the alien was just brought that to set with him to ride around like while he was killing time. He was like, "Oh, that's great. You should do this in the scene." So it was kind of like this big, you know, he was just kind of fucking with the actors in a cool way. But it's such a funny, dumb little addition. And then just doing that whole scene, like the whole thing where he gives us the answers, and then David Duchovny like throws himself to the ground, and it, you know, because it's my idealized version of the end of the X-Files team. It really kind of, I thought it was a really brilliant kind of reveal of like what was going on with Reggie. That he basically is like a fan. He's just a fan who had listened in on these two agents and always wanted to sort of be more than he was. So of course that would be his version of what went down.
Because I think it was such a brave show, especially being on sort of the Fox network, to be so brazen with how they talk about Trump.
Yeah,
and, you know, there's no filter on that episode at all. And
no.
One thing I wanted to ask you, kind of as we sort of almost start to wrap up, was what is the challenge of being perhaps like a comedian and a writer in this sort of era of like Trump, where everything's so larger than life, where it's like, you know, people are, you know, something that would have been a joke for a week is now it's an hour, and then something's moved on to the other. What's the challenges for people like yourself and writers in this kind of time?
It is really challenging. I remember I have some friends who write at Jimmy Fallon, and they're just like how are we going to make fun of this? Like, I mean, but initially you're like, how am I going to make fun of us? But you have to do it because it provides such a release for people, you know? It provides such a different... It's the same kind of identification of like, oh, we're screwed. This is awful. But coming at it from this other angle diffuses it a little bit, or I think it allows people to have a little bit more protection from it, a little more ownership of it, as opposed to like, this is this terrible thing that's affecting us. You can be like, yeah, it's affecting us, but I'm going to take back some strength I have in being like not so affected by it, by laughing at it, you know, by deconstructing it a little bit. So I think the challenge is there in finding fresh new angles on what could just be complaining. You know, just identifying like, here's how he's crazy and here's how he's bad. But the other side of it is it's kind of an interesting time where a lot of material that I mean, things that are big triggers for people, or hot button issues, or the idea of being politically correct has shifted a lot of comedy. I think, good and bad. I think it's great that it's sort of taking away a lot of the easy jokes, but I think it's also made people occasionally hesitant to try stuff that might be on the surface seeming like, oh my God, that's so disrespectful. But then it's like, no, but I'm making a point about this. So I think there's like an adjustment period. But that seems to happen. I remember that happening in the 90s, that there was this big PC backlash in reaction to all the kind of like, coke-addled bro attitude that came out of the 80s. So I think it's a pendulum thing, but he's just the worst.
And just
it's so embarrassing. On behalf of my country, I'm so embarrassed.
Hey, we can't complain. We've got Brexit and everything else in between. So the idea that we've got any moral high ground over America, and I mean, he's half Scottish as well. His mum was from Scotland, so we've got a lot of blame to take as well. So we can have a pint and commiserate what we've done to the world together.
Yeah, if you guys had not come up with golf, none of this would have happened.
Absolutely. So. And finally, is there, obviously, like, we know you here in the UK for a lot of your work, but quite a few bits and pieces of your work haven't kind of made it over here. Is there anything that you're working on just now, or any shows that we should all kind of check out or keep an eye open for?
I appreciate this promotional opportunity. There's a network called Adult Swim in the States that does very experimental, oftentimes kind of like weird or dark comedy, animation and comedy. And I did a special about a year and a half ago called Mr. Neighbor's House. That's sort of like a very dark children's show of sorts. So I just wrapped. I'm doing another special version of that. So it's just one that I do, like, hopefully I'll do, one a year for a while. But I'd love people to see that, because it's my own creation with a couple of friends of mine, and it's the stuff that I find really funny that some people are like, ooh, you're okay, you're dark. But I love it. So it's available. You can see it on any of my social media stuff. It has a link in the bio, and it's housed on their website. So I'd really love for people to discover that. And then I'm on a show on TBS called People of Earth that I'm a regular on. That deals with aliens. Like, do you know anything about this show?
No, I'm not too familiar with it.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Is like there's so many shows now. It's crazy. Last year we made 400 plus shows in the States. So there's a lot of great content. But this is a really, really good show that I'm very proud of, and I love the cast. And it's about a support group for people who think they've been abducted by aliens.
Oh, I need to see this.
Yeah, and it's a real thing. It's based on a real. There are actual sort of like step program support groups for people who believe they've had encounters. And so the thing I love about the show is it's people dealing with, it's sort of like, and when I got this thing on the X-Files, I was like, am I being typecast as a crazy person? I play crazy people a lot, I realize. Or people who are resisting against their own sort of internal mental battles. But the thing I love about the show is like it is a comparable issue. It's like someone who's dealing with PTSD, or somebody who's dealing with anxiety. Because from the outside view, it's like, well, no, you're crazy. This is not real. But it's like, but the feelings I have are real. And so all the people are dealing with these very conflicted feelings of like wanting to be heard and wanting to be believed, but everybody thinks they're crazy. And then at the same time, they're actually aliens who are fucking with them while they're going through all this stuff. So I strongly encourage people to see People of Earth and Mr. Neighbor's house.
Absolutely, I'm going to be definitely getting on top of that. I've got a long train journey
Cool.
tomorrow morning, so that's going to be my going to be mine. And like you touched on it there, you've got social media platforms. If people wanted to kind of reach out to you, follow work that you're going to be involved in, things you're promoting, where can kind of people find you online, Brian?
You can find me in the internet sphere. My favorite thing is my Instagram account, which a lot of people might just be like, "Oh, these are weird pictures," but I used to be a photographer, so that's where I get my jollies. And then on Twitter, and both of those handles are the Brian Huskey.
Excellent.
But on Twitter, I'm not as active. Get ready on Twitter. Basically, I'll promote stuff. So you might just be like, "This guy's always talking about himself. Who cares?"
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on today. It's
Thanks,
been
man.
so great to hear about all your experiences and hear from you. It's been a real pleasure for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Your questions are great, and you're a good interviewer.
Oh,
Thanks
cheers!
so much.
Thank you very much. I'll put that on my LinkedIn account so you can endorse me on that one.
All right, cool.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
man. Thanks so much
Cheers.
for your time. And,
Bye.
Have fun over there. Good
Cheers.
luck with Brexit.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.